Marie Curie and Loie Fuller were two women whose work and lives changed the world, but you may have only heard of one of them. My name's Liz Heinecke, and I wrote Radiant, the Dancer, the Scientist, and A Friendship Forged in Light. So Marie Curie and Loie Fuller were both outsiders. Marie came to Paris from Poland, where she was escaping a society where she wasn't allowed to pursue her education. So she ended up discovering two radioactive elements called radium and polonium. She was also the first person to ever measure radioactivity. She figured out how to do that. She coined the word radioactivity, and she was just a groundbreaking scientist. There were no women scientists really in Paris at the time, so she broke all the barriers to become one of the most famous people in Paris, and certainly one of the most famous scientists in the world, and ended up winning 2 Nobel Prizes, one in physics and one in chemistry. Loie Fuller loved the spotlight, and if she were alive today, she would be a social media star. She came to Paris hoping to find an audience that could appreciate what she was doing, because she had figured out how to do this amazing dance. She designed this huge gown that had rods sewn into the sleeves that she could manipulate and make all these amazing forms. She just appeared into her dances, and she became waves and flowers and butterflies. And she was also the first person to figure out how to really use electric stage lights effectively. So she would add these things called lighting gels, different colors to the lights to illuminate this gown that she was dancing in. And she was just this incredible creative performer, and Paris fell in love with her. Marie and Loie met when Loie wrote a letter to Marie asking for some radium. And radium was this highly radioactive element that Marie had just discovered and was working to isolate in her lab. But the papers wrote about it. Loie was like, I have to have some of this to light my dancing costume because no one's ever done this before. So she wrote a letter to Marie asking for radium. And Marie said, no, sorry, it's too expensive, it's too dangerous. But Loie then wrote back and said, well, you have to let me come dance for you. So Loie actually went to the Curie's house and performed for them. And Loie and Marie developed this lifelong friendship. They met year after year after year and supported each other and helped each other through hard times, which I think is like the real sign of a friendship. They made amazing contributions to the sciences and the arts. So Marie, for example, developed the Curie, the standard for measuring all radioactivity, and her discovery of the radioactive element radium allowed for the first Curie therapy, radium therapy, but it was the first use of radioactive elements to treat cancer. And Loie Fuller, you can see everywhere. So she was the living symbol of Art Nouveau, which was this artistic style with very flowing, wavy lines and lots of natural motifs, fish and birds, women with long flowing hair, lots of beautiful nudes. The stage was wrapped in these sinuous forms, and you can see this all over Paris. She is also apparent every time you go to a play or, to see your favorite band. When you see those colorful lights doing all these cool things to illuminate the stage, and the actors, when they're illuminating like sheer screens, a lot of that was stuff that Loie Fuller was the first person to do.
More precious than gold or silver, the ore contains an element of incredible properties and powers. 14 tons of crude mineral deposits are needed to extract just 1 single ounce of finished, refined end product, radium.
Many new technologies, we look for the good in them and we embrace them, but we don't often understand the long-term implications of technology. And radium was a great example of that. Your body can't always tell it from calcium, so it can get incorporated into your bones. And as the radium decays, it throws off these radioactive particles. Some of the particles, called alpha particles, can't travel far enough to get outside of your body, so they bounce around in your flesh and just destroy things. So radium can cause cancer, it's super dangerous. Marie Curie, by the end of her life, she was talking about the fact that this lovely technology she discovered also had a very dark, deadly, dangerous side, and just saying, like many things, you need to know how to work with this stuff and be careful. I have a little piece of radium of my own. This is a 1903 Crooks Spinthoroscope. It was like the cool science toy for the rich people in 1903. It's a tiny tube. It has like a lens you can look through on one end. On the other end, it's solid, but inside that brass is a very thin screen coated with a chemical called zinc sulfide. And there is a needle with a tiny piece of radium salt on it. And there's a dial on it, so you can dial the radium closer and further from the screen. When you look through the eyepiece, this radium that's on the needle is decaying. So radium is an unstable element. It throws off radioactive particles and waves. Alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma waves. And when these particles strike this zinc sulfide screen, they excite the chemicals in it and it gives off a flash of light each time a radioactive particle strikes it. Loie Fuller carried one of these to the United States and showed it to reporters because of course she had one, naturally. But I just love this. I feel like it's just a little piece of history connected to both Marie and Loie Fuller that I can hold in my hand. And let me show you this too. It's super radioactive. This was actually the predecessor of the modern Geiger counter, and this is a Geiger counter that I have. Let me get this on. And Geiger counters beep every time, you hear a click every time particles hit it. Okay, so let's hear. It's starting to click. I don't know if you can hear that. Okay, so it's super radioactive. If I keep holding this next to this radium in the spinthariscope, the alarm will actually start going off because it's like uncomfortably high levels of radioactivity. It's not gonna hurt me just holding it for a few minutes, but you wouldn't wanna have it like next to your bed at night, which Marie Curie did. She actually kept a little vial of radium next to her bed at night. This is uranium glass. And back around the turn of the 19th century, glass makers used to add the radioactive element to glassware to give it cool colors. So this glass is actually radioactive. You can also find radioactive glass, uranium glass, in some marbles. I pulled out some old marbles I had in my basement. And to see whether these are radioactive, or not to see whether they're radioactive, to see whether they contain radium, you can use a black light, just like the kind you buy at a store. And what happens is when a black light contacts the uranium compounds, it excites the compounds in the uranium and it makes, it fluoresces. So you can actually see fluorescence. So when I took my jar of marbles and put it in a dark room and held this light up, I could totally see some of them glowing bright green. It's not because of the radioactivity that they're glowing, they just have fluorescent compounds in them. But if I hold my Geiger counter up to these, they're pretty radioactive actually. And so there's uranium glass like in antique stores everywhere. It's usually green or greenish yellow. You've probably heard of Vaseline glass maybe. That is some radioactive stuff that you can find just, around on the internet and antique stores. Like your grandma might have some in her house. I think these women are a wonderful example of what hard work and persistence and some good luck can do. And I do think if there is a moral to this story, it's just to embrace technology. It can really bring you wonderful things. For Loie and Marie, it brought them wonderful things. It allowed them to be creative. It sort of, was their life's work.